Look, everyone's talking about emotional intelligence these days. EQ this, EQ that. If you spend 5 minutes on LinkedIn, you'll find a dozen leadership gurus telling you that high EQ is the secret sauce to becoming a transformational leader. They're not wrong, but they're missing something critical. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. Most people don't have high emotional intelligence, and no amount of corporate training seminars or 5-point frameworks is going to magically give it to them. Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Detroit Lions, is living proof that when you actually have emotional intelligence, when it's genuine and flows from who you really are, it's a completely different animal than the manufactured checklist version that most companies are trying to teach. And that's what we're talking about today. Let me tell you what drives me crazy. I spent years in corporate America and I've watched this play out over and over again. Companies send their managers to emotional intelligence training. They learn buzzwords. They memorize the components: self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, relationship management. They practice their active listening. They're told to ask people about weekends, to make eye contact, to show empathy. And when that happens, they come back to the office and check the boxes. Tell my team I appreciate them. Check. Walk into the office once a day. Check. Ask people how they're doing. Check. It's performative, it's hollow, and people see right through it. I remember this one executive I worked with, nice lady, went to all the right training programs, but when you'd talk to her, her eyes were constantly scanning the room. She'd ask how you were doing while literally looking over your shoulder to see who else was in the vicinity. You could feel that she didn't actually give a damn about your answer. She was just doing what she'd been told was emotionally intelligent. And she credited herself as an emotionally intelligent leader. That's not emotional intelligence. That's theater. Now let's talk about Dan Campbell. When Campbell took over the Lions in 2021, he gave what might be the most memorable introductory press conference in NFL history. He talked about his team being so tough, they'd bite kneecaps if they had to. He got emotional. He was raw, unfiltered, authentic. And the national media went nuts. Some people mocked him, others loved him. But here's what matters. He wasn't trying to be anyone else. In an interview with The Ringer, Campbell said something that perfectly captures this. I want to be able to talk with what's in my heart and on my mind because that's who I am. It's just everything. That's the essence of who I am. He went on to say he hates it when he has to calm down and deliver bullet points. He doesn't want to write some carefully crafted speech. He just wants to be himself. That's authentic emotional intelligence. It's not a technique he learned in a weekend workshop. It's who he is at his core. Here's what Frank Ragnow, the Lions center, said about Campbell. He authentically loves his team and is the same guy every day. Think about that for a second. Authentically loves his team. When was the last time you heard an employee say that about their boss? When was the last time you said that about your boss? And the second part, the same guy every day? That's consistency. People know what they're getting. There's no guessing which version of the coach is going to show up. That builds trust in a way no amount of corporate training can manufacture. Linebacker Alex Anzalone put it even more directly. He said Campbell is very high in emotional intelligence. And here's an example. Defensive tackle DJ Reader recalled a time he was complaining about a call during the game. Campbell walked over and said, "Well, DJ, what are you going to do about it?" That's emotional intelligence in action. Campbell didn't coddle him. He didn't ignore the emotion. He redirected it. He made Reader check himself in the moment. And Reader said, I had to check myself in the moment, damn, what am I going to do about it? I can't just sit over here and complain about it. That's the kind of leadership that actually changes behavior because it's real. Now here's where it gets interesting. Dan Campbell cries, openly in press conferences. After the Lions lost to the Commanders in the divisional round this year, Campbell got emotional talking about his players. His voice cracked, tears came. He said, what they put into it, a lot of people don't know what they go through. You have to get up, your body's beat to shit, mentally stay locked in and do those things. Long season, it's my fault. He took the blame. He showed vulnerability. He cried for his players. And you know what? His team respects him more for it. Back in 2021, after another tough loss, Campbell cried in a press conference. Some people wondered if that was a sign of weakness. But quarterback Jared Goff said, I think we all kind of feel the same way he does. It's hard. One writer nailed it. This is the guy. Dan Campbell can take this team places, and it's going to be because he cares. This is what separates authentic emotional intelligence from the fake version. Campbell's not trying to show emotion as a leadership technique. He's not thinking, I should cry here because it'll make me seem more human and relatable. The man is just feeling what he feels and letting it show. In our society, especially in football where masculinity runs rampant, we're taught that men don't cry, leaders don't show emotion. You rub some dirt on it and get back out there. But Campbell throws that garbage out the window, and his players don't think he's weak. They think he's genuine. Here's the problem with trying to teach emotional intelligence in a corporate training room. True emotional intelligence can't really be faked long term. Research actually backs this up. Studies show that people who try to fake EQ, who copy the behaviors without having the actual awareness and empathy behind them, eventually get exposed. Harvard Business Review published research showing that people commonly engage in manipulative misuses of emotional intelligence, the intentional, subtle regulation of one's emotions to engineer responses from others that might not be in their best interests. In other words, people use EQ tactics to manipulate, not to genuinely connect. And here's the kicker. Even when people aren't trying to be manipulative, when they're earnestly trying to act emotionally intelligent without having the underlying skills, it falls flat. One expert put it this way: if you're trying to fake emotional intelligence, you're really missing out on opportunities to engage. Why? Because people can tell. We've evolved to detect authenticity. We know when someone's just going through the motions. Now, before people jump down my throat, yes, emotional intelligence can be improved. There's research showing that with conscious effort, feedback, and practice, people can develop greater self-awareness and empathy. But here's my take. There's a ceiling. You can go from low EQ to moderate EQ with training, maybe lots of training. You can learn to pause before reacting. You can get better at reading body language. You can improve. But you're never going to go from moderate EQ to Dan Campbell level EQ through a workshop. That level of emotional intelligence, the kind that makes grown men willing to run through walls for you, that's innate. It's baked into who you are. It's like this. I can take guitar lessons. I can learn to play competently. But I'm never going to be Eddie Van Halen, no matter how many hours I practice. There's a baseline level of natural ability required. Leadership is the same way. Some people just have it. Here's what I learned building my own businesses and working in corporate environments. Authenticity is more powerful than technique. I've seen leaders with mediocre EQ by textbook standards who were wildly effective because people trusted them. They knew where they stood. They knew the leader had their back. And I've seen leaders who could rattle off all 5 components of Goldman's emotional intelligence model, but had multiple employees quit every year like clockwork because they couldn't stand them. The difference? Authenticity. Dan Campbell isn't trying to be someone he's not. He's not following a playbook on how to be an emotionally intelligent leader. He's just being Campbell, the guy who cries when his team loses, who tells his players he loves them, who gets fired up and uses language that makes PR teams nervous, who challenges people in the moment when they need it. And that's why it works. His college friends say the press conferences are just how Campbell talked in the dorm room. One said, he's just that guy. He's not a fake person. He's not going to be fake. Let me hit you with an uncomfortable truth. The corporate emphasis on EQ can actually create worse leaders. How? Because it gives people a false sense that they can just learn the moves and become great leaders. It creates a generation of managers who think leadership is about checking boxes and saying the right things. But the real leadership, the Dan Campbell kind, is about being willing to be vulnerable, to show your real emotions, to connect with people on a genuine human level. And you can't teach that in a conference room over stale coffee and PowerPoint slides. When companies overemphasize EQ training, when leaders talk about how much they're embracing EQ qualities, when they write blog posts touting their EQ traits, we end up with leaders who are good at seeming emotionally intelligent while actually being disconnected from the teams. They know the language, they can fake the behaviors, at least for a little while. And when the pressure's on, when things get real, the mask comes off. Dan Campbell doesn't have that problem because he's not wearing a mask. What you see is what you get. Look, I'm not saying companies shouldn't try to help their leaders develop better emotional skills. Training can help, feedback can help, practice can help. But let's be honest about what we're working with. If you're hiring or promoting someone into leadership, don't just look at whether they went through EQ training or can recite the principles. Look at whether people actually want to work for them. Look at whether their teams trust them. And definitely pay attention if their teams are leaving them. Look at whether they're consistent. Look at whether they're authentic or whether they genuinely care about the people around them, because that is the real test. Dan Campbell has been so successful in Detroit not because he's mastered some leadership framework, but because his players know beyond any doubt that he genuinely cares about them. He shows up the same way every day. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. He takes responsibility for when things go wrong. He celebrates with his team when they go right. That's not technique, that's character. And here's my possibly controversial take. I think real leadership, the kind that inspires people, can be improved, but can't really be taught. You either have that authentic emotional core or you don't. Dan Campbell has it in spades. Most corporate leaders, they're just trying to fake it, and people can tell the difference. So if you're in a leadership position, here's my advice. Stop trying to learn the moves of emotional intelligence and start actually being present with your people. Stop checking boxes. Start genuinely caring. Stop performing and just start being real. Because in the end, authenticity beats technique every single time. That's the Dan Campbell difference.